Hey everybody, what's going on? Hellmite here, bringing you another video from Grab the Lantern today. Today I wanted to talk a little bit more about Viego, the Ruined King, as I did talk about him a very small amount during my recap of the Riot video where they talked about all their plans for 2021, but I wanted to spend a little bit more time talking about Ruined King because I feel like he's actually going to be really good. I think there are a lot of tools this champion brings to the table. Now, I'm fully aware the last time I was this excited about a champion, it was Rel, and I really wasn't sure what I was doing on Rel, and I really wasn't sure how I wasn't able to execute on Rel, but I do think Viego actually does have what it takes, and I do think Viego has a lot of really interesting tools that will make him quite effective in games, and at the very least, you can tell with these champions, I am excited about them, and it means that they're doing something right, so at the very least, they do have that going for them. But anyways, let's go ahead and talk about Viego a little bit more than I did during the previous video and kind of talk about his abilities. I did have some time to hop on PvE and play a little tiny bit of Viego, so I also have a little bit more context behind what he does. If you guys aren't on PvE or haven't had an opportunity to play him yet, I will be able to give you a little bit more information. Now, he feels a lot like Yasuo, which I know is a weird thing to say. It does kind of feel like Riot's new champion design philosophy is make every champion into Yasuo, because Yasuo is a popular champion. We had Yone, who was intended to be Yasuo 2.0. Now we have Viego, who feels very much so like Yasuo. A big reason of this is he is a manaless champion, which I did not see coming. I really am not a big fan of all these manaless champions that Riot are putting out. I feel like they tend to have a lot more balance problems than mana champions because there are no resources to actually use and to make sure that you're keeping track of. You kind of just spam out your champion's abilities and you don't really feel bad about that because you know that your abilities are just going to come back up. A lot of these champions that like Yasuo have very low cooldowns as well, so it's not even something like Garen where he has to be very cognizant of when he uses Q, when he uses W, that sort of a thing. You really don't have that with champions like Yasuo. There's maybe one cooldown that's actually a relevant cooldown and everything else is fairly quick to come up. Viego is not really an exception. Everything he does comes up very quickly. His Q is almost identical to Yasuo Q in the sense that it is a skill shot, applies on hit effects, has a sort of bonus after you land it, and then it also has the reduction on its cooldown based on his attack speed. So this is a champion you can build Blade of the Ruined King on and should build Blade of the Ruined King on, which, you know, totally makes sense from a flavor standpoint, but it does mean that he is another champion very similar to Yasuo in that regard. The Q is going to be a very spammable move. You're going to use that as your sort of primary combo, as Qing an enemy and then following that up with your double hit auto attack afterwards. You are able to get the double hit. All it does is mark the targets that you hit with your Q, so you can follow that up with a double hit against all of them afterwards in the similar fashion to Skarner E when it lands on multiple enemies, how you get the stunning auto attack on each enemy that is afflicted by your E. It's a similar fashion to Viego Q here, where you can Q a couple of minions and then you're able to get the double hit against each of them. Honestly, this makes his sustain pretty good in the jungle. I know they did just nerf the healing he gets from jungle monsters on PvE, so it may not be quite as good as it was before, but really, Viego jungles pretty well. He is able to keep himself topped up pretty nicely. Now, he doesn't have that much sort of utility to bring to a gank situation. He only has one ability to set him up, and Q, unfortunately, does not have very good wave clear. Viego, in general, does not have very good wave clear, so if you are trying to play this champion in the mid lane, I would probably advise against it. I just don't think he has the wave clear to survive in that sort of an environment. Top lane, though, because of his manaless nature and because of the healing he gets from his Q, he can kind of Q 3 minions, then auto attack each of them for the heal, then Q them again because, like I said, Q's a fairly low cooldown. You're going to build attack speed as one of your primary stats. I do think he's a Blade of the Ruined King first champion, so I really do feel like he is able to sustain himself pretty decently and could find a home in the top lane depending on sort of his ability to trade with champions. But because he does so much percent health damage, again, I kind of feel like he has the ability to go to toe-to-toe with some of these bruisers as long as he's able to keep himself safe. But we'll talk a little bit more about his safety here in a bit. Now, moving on to Viego's W here, it's a little jank. Remember that the charge time only increases the stun duration and the range on the projectile. It does not increase your dash distance. So there is a little bit of a sort of unlearning curve where you're a lot used to abilities like Viego, for example, where you want to charge that up because that's giving you more distance on the punch. Viego can quick tap his W and not feel too bad about it because he does have the ability to at least get the stun and the dash off immediately. He does not have to charge it unless he wants the bonus range on that W, so, or the bonus stun duration, but really because the longer you spend charging it, the more an enemy champion has time to move to avoid it, so it's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation where you do kind of want to just quick tap it when you can, because at least it gets you the damage, it gets you the stun. You're then able to follow that up with the Q, the double auto attack. Viego's definitely a PTA champion, I feel. Conqueror felt okay on him. He is able to stack that fairly decently, but he's much burstier of a champion than I think a lot of other champions like Yone even. Yone needs to be in a fight for a little bit longer. He really does get some value out of Conqueror and staying in a fight. Viego doesn't really have that. He kind of sort of wants to go in, get the PTA proc for the damage amp, do what he can, and try to finish that kill as quickly as possible. So I do feel like in that regard, Quick Tap W is his best result. It does have some interesting connotations with his E though, which I'll talk a whole bunch about that here because it's a really, really interesting and sometimes wonky ability. The spreading behavior on it is a bit iffy. Sometimes there are dead zones in between the wall you cast it on and the cloud itself that you're not stealthed in, so you'll be next to the wall and not stealth, but when you move a little bit further away from the wall, now you're in the cloud, so you are stealth. There's some weird stuff with that, and the range on it is a lot smaller than you would think, so you'll kind of throw it at a wall expecting it to hit the wall and extend, and then it kind of doesn't, and it just hangs out there. So you really need to make sure you are in range for that ability to hit the wall, otherwise you won't get the extend. But the extend is really nice. It does give you a very large area of effect that essentially Viego could be anywhere in, so there is sort of a mind game potential of this ability to throw it on a wall or throw it on some terrain, and you don't even have to be in it. You don't even have to be walking at the enemy champions and saying, you know, I'm going to try and set something up. It is sort of a psych out move for you to say, I could be anywhere in this cloud. I could be winding up a W right now for that bonus stun duration. I could be totally farming raptors right now. You have no idea where I am. So in that regard, it's an interesting setup tool. But in combat, remember that it's only camouflage. It's not true invisibility like a Kali W. So even though Viego can use this without needing it to hit a wall, it'll sort of create a small pool of mist that he has the camouflage in. It's not nearly as effective as a Kali W in the middle of a fight to drop aggro with. It is significantly better, like I said, as a setup tool, something Viego can drop down and sort of do a fake out, will he or won't he sort of play with it. The other thing you can use this for, the quick tap, it will not give you the stealth, but you do get that bonus movement speed and bonus attack speed, and the steroid's actually pretty nice. So this is still an ability that you can use in the middle of a gank, pop it in the middle of the lane just to give yourself the room to close on an enemy champion. You can charge the W in there, and it's really tough to dodge it then because you don't know how Viego is behaving in the cloud. So he may be going for the prediction, you're going to keep moving. He may be going for the, you're going to back off. It's a little hard to deal with where Viego is actually going to come with this ability. So there is some usage of it in a gank situation. But like I said, I do feel like for the most part, you are going to kind of use this ability as a set-up move, as sort of a move that you want to fake enemies out with. So I do kind of like how that sort of works for Viego. It does make his jungling pretty nice, but I do feel like it could also reveal him in a lot of situations because, like I said, the spreading behavior is huge. You really kind of get cloud everywhere when you use this ability, so it is something to keep in mind because the enemy jungler could be doing crab and then see a cloud billow out from blue buff and say, oh, Viego's on his blue buff, or Viego's doing grump. Maybe, I don't know, he's somewhere in there at least. So you do have to be a little cognizant of when and where you use this ability, especially because this is his longest cooldown. Finally, talking about Viego's R here, its range is actually pretty small, and the cast time is a lot longer than I would have liked, especially given that the dash is not very big, and the fact that Viego is a little CC'd himself after he comes out of the dash. You're not able to fully regain control of your champion for maybe a fraction of a second, but it still kind of ruins the very fluid feel of the champion using the R, and if you don't get the KO immediately, you kind of are just sitting there having done damage but not doing that much else. The other problem with it is that you don't end up immediately possessing someone if you execute them with the R. Their body is there, you have to right click it to say, yes, I would like to possess this champion. So again, it's sort of it feels very clunky. I'm not a big fan of how Viego ult feels in that regard. It feels good when you're body bursting out from a champion that you were possessing. That feels okay, especially if you're using it to escape or something like that, but it doesn't feel very good as a sort of, I killed you with this ability, and now I'm frozen for a sec, and now I gotta right-click that guy for a sec, and now I can keep going on my killing spree as Viego. So in that regard, it is a little wonky, but it does combo well with the rest of what Viego wants to do. And that leads me to a great segue with Viego's passive. His passive is nuts, which it should be because this is a passive that does literally nothing until Viego has gotten a kill on somebody. Right, so in a similar fashion to how Lissandra's base kit is very strong because of the fact that she doesn't have a passive until someone's died in that team fight, right? So, like, even in lane, Lissandra passive doesn't actually do anything for her. So Viego has a similar passive in that regard, but it's very strong. You go untargetable for that brief cast time while you're possessing somebody, so you can avoid damage with it. So they do, you know, you kind of pop out of someone, execute them with your R, and they say, dump damage on Viego, he's free, but then you right-click the champion you just killed. And that means that you go into this untargetability state, maybe you dodge some damage, but it also means that champions can set up on you because they know exactly where you're going to be standing when you come out of animation. So there is that sort of facet to it as well, where you can kind of say, okay, yeah, but I know he's going to pop out as the Senna right here, so we can kind of deal with him from there. And your health total, you do heal when you have this ability going, but it's not like a tremendous amount of heal. And again, you don't have that much mobility, so I do feel like it makes Viego very easy to sort of combo on, unless the rest of his team is sort of following up with him and sort of making space so that Viego can get the body snatch underway and then continue on with the team fight. And even if you don't want the champion's kit, right? You frag somebody that you just don't care about at all, you don't like their base kit, you don't like their build, you don't want anything that champion has to do, it is still worth possessing them because you do heal, you get that moment of untargetability, and it just gives you your ultimate. Even if your ultimate was on cooldown beforehand, if you just kill the champion regularly and then possess them, you get your ult back, which is huge. So you can then use that to either body burst out of them as an escape, you can body burst out of them to continue the fight because there is a 99% slow attached to that R, so it is pretty good in that regard. There's a lot of things you can do just by possessing the champion first. Obviously, utility-based champions are the best target for Viego's passive because you can kind of throw out all their utility abilities and then pop R in order to just hop out if you don't want the rest of what they're doing. Another thing is to keep in mind that you gain the champion's build while possessing them. So if you are, if you possess someone like Kog'Maw, for example, you have to kind of keep in mind, well, is it AD or AP Kog'Maw? Is it support Senna or AD Senna? That sort of a thing you want to keep in mind because you will be playing as that champion for a brief period of time. So you want to make sure that you're aware of kind of what that champion wants to do. AP Malphite, for example, will be very squishy. So if you run at the enemy with this Malphite build expecting yourself to be a tank, you're not going to be very tanky and you're probably still going to die. So definitely something to keep in mind when you do possess people with Viego passive. Finally, I want to talk about a little bit on the lore real quick for Ruined King, as he is one of the biggest lore champions we've had in a while. Unfortunately, as a real quick side note, there is no toggle on his armor form. Riot are preserving that as a gameplay read for when he's in his E, so there is not going to be a toggle on that, unfortunately. And that sort of leads me to my next problem, which is that Riot did a good job of sort of explaining away why Viego isn't a Sauron or Skeleton King-esque character like we expected. He wasn't someone who was ever supposed to inherit. He never had really any intentions behind the throne. He's just kind of a pretty boy who was trying to, hedonism it up, and then he got the throne and didn't really want it. So in that regard, his design is okay, but I do dislike how the visual design of Riot Games, Viego is just kind of the next in a long string of Riot Games making champions that are just pretty for the sake of being pretty. They very much so shied away from monster champions, and that's really, really disappointing for me because you could have done a lot with Viego, and while I don't think his design is as bad as it could have been, I do feel like they really made him a pretty boy for the sake of being a pretty boy and not because they had an interesting design or they were doing something unique or otherwise subversive with his design. So I am disappointed in that regard. Next champion is almost guaranteed to be Viego's wife. Riot dropped a ton of hints that the next champion is going to be a tailor, and Isolde, who's Viego's wife, was a seamstress. So that almost tells me that we're going to get Isolde immediately following Viego, which will be pretty cool, and I'm interested to see how the story is going to tell that in regards to Isolde, because she is sort of in two parts, but well, we'll get to more of that when Isolde does start getting revealed, because right now we are on the Viego hype train. And just as a real quick side note, Viego is Vladimir's nephew and Callista's uncle. It's a lot of weird stuff in the family tree going on here, but if you don't believe me, check out the Viego interactions, check out the Viego lore. You can kind of figure it out from there. So, but either way, I am excited. I think I'm a little satisfied with where Viego's sort of lore is at, and I'm really excited with where Viego is at kit-wise. I think he has a lot of really interesting things he's doing. So anyways, that's going to be it for me today, guys. Thank you all so very much for watching. I hope you found this informative. I hope you found this entertaining. Let me know what you guys are thinking of Viego down in the comments section below, especially if you had a chance to play him. If you enjoyed today's video, go ahead and leave a like. And if you really enjoyed today's video, consider subscribing. I upload a video every Monday, Friday, and on patch days as well. Once again, thank you guys so very much for watching. I do appreciate it. And I'll talk to you all later.